Hello, and we are live. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for those that are joining us live. And if you are watching these on replay, thank you for watching these and for your interest in this topic. I have an amazing group with me today. But if this is your first time joining one of these, my name is Lola Adeyemo, and I am the founder of EQI Mindset, an ERG and talent management consulting company. I am based in San Diego, and I also have a nonprofit called Immigrants Incorporate Inc., 501c3 advocacy and professional development community for immigrant professional space. And these conversations started out of a cross-company ERG meeting that we host every month. And one of the things I recognized pretty quickly is when we gather every first Friday with ERGs across different companies, we give priority and it's more of a coaching resource provision for ERG leaders. But there were deeper conversations that we needed to be having that will help organizations as they work around DEI and ERG support. And this is one of the favorite part of it because I get to curate these conversations with people that have been in the ERG space. And today I am going to let these leaders introduce themselves to you. So, Terry, I'll start with you. If you could introduce yourself and what you currently do.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. I really am grateful for the opportunity. My name is Terry Albert. My pronouns are she, they, he, pretty much whatever you want. I'm based just outside of Dallas, Texas, where it is the land of hot right now. I've been working in the DEI space for a little over 3 years now. Currently, I'm the president and owner of Kyanite Consulting. We just started our social medias yesterday. Go me. Where we do DEI consulting for small, medium, large companies, focusing on LGBT, disability, and women's efforts. So that's me.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks for joining us today. Chantel?
Thank you, Lola, for inviting me. I appreciate it. I am located in Durham, North Carolina, and my unofficial title is Culture Lady. I love that you put that on the flyer.
I love it.
Because I'm really deeply interested in the culture and communities and inside of companies, and so that really came from the opportunity that I've had to be a part of like 4 or 5 global Fortune 500 companies serving inside of ERGs and even serving as the ERG advisor to 8 of them while in one of the companies. So I have a deep love for the employee part of employee resource group. I know there are a lot of different terminologies for them, but I really love the idea of people assimilating around their identity and being supported inside of their company. And so I lean into that, and I've done it, as I said, at several Fortune 500 companies. But I am now hanging my hat on probably in another 2 weeks or so. I'll be opening my consulting firm dedicated to community and culture.
Thank you, Chantel. Glad to have known you for a while and to have you join us here today. Hi, Ed.
Hi, Lola. Thank you again for the invitation. I really have enjoyed being part of your ERG monthly sessions. So again, I'm Ed Vargas. I've got my bachelor's in business and my law degree at Santa Clara University, a Jesuit school in Silicon Valley. I'm an international consultant, author, and throughout my career, I've really been involved with diversity, equity, inclusion, employee resource groups, strategic planning, marketing. I'm currently right now president of my own consulting firm, Vargas and Associates LLC. I'm president of the Vina World Foundation, a nonprofit focused on helping underserved communities. I'm also the Northwest Region president for HLX Plus. That's a national Hispanic group of volunteers. And so the kinds of focus of the things that I do is really taking the ERG people that really feel good when they volunteer and can do something in the local communities. I see that potential when we collaborate. So my focus is on how we can have a greater social impact with the nonprofit partnering with an ERG or BRG. I just did a presentation to Arvis Bank, speaking to their executive corporate sponsors, and the leadership from 8 different, they call them associate impact groups. So again, with this whole discussion and language around DEI, we really want to focus on having an impact and not get caught up in the language and the terminology. But that's my driver, is to really have a change or an impact, a positive impact that can be exponential and not just be a really successful silo, but within a company have the ERGs partner together. That's a lot of what I did at AT&T, partnering with 5 of them, and then reach out to other organizations as well, that you have that common mission together.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you for being here. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes to explain what ERG is. So if you're new to these sessions are called ERG sessions, and for those of us that are in the space, ERG is kind of a catch-all acronym that we use a lot. So I want to take a couple of minutes to say ERG is an acronym that stands for Employee Resource. And I think we both touched on the naming. A lot of companies call it BRG, Business Resource Group. There are companies that have Associate Resource Group, Colleague Resource Group. Companies have it by different names, and but the simplest way to kind of define what ERGs are is inclusive spaces and communities within organizations. So when I speak to students, I always explain, about the student groups you have on campus. It's spaces and communities around different interests within the organization, but they are very organized and they have a vision and a focus. So that's the difference. It's not a union. They are groups that are organized and support the company and also the individuals. So they are gathered around different interests, whatever the organization determines that is needed. So when you hear us using ERGs or BRGs interchangeably, we mean exactly the same thing. So corporate America, corporate institutions across different industry, not just the Fortune 500, not just the small companies. Sometimes in academia, they're having ERGs for their employees as well, for their staff. So I just wanted to make sure we captured that in there, because we have people listening across different platforms, and we also have people with experience across different space. But thank you again for introducing yourself. I wanted to make sure I captured what everybody's expertise is on this panel before we go back to ERG journey, which is the fun part of this conversation. So this panel is around employee resource groups as career, ERG, BRG as career activator, right? And so I would like each of you to take a couple of minutes to tell us about your ERG journey. How did you find out? How did you join? And why did you join the one you did or the ones you did? Because I can tell it's going to be the ones. So, take us back a couple of, I don't know, years, probably. Do you want to start again, Terry?
Sure, happy to. I jokingly, yet not, like to say that my experience with ERG started with a survey. So our women's group in the company I worked for at the time, Hitachi Vantara, they had brought in a speaker for the women's group, and afterwards sent out a survey like you tend to do. And one of the questions on there was, would you be interested in leading an ERG? And I, having recently had come out at my workplace, was like, sure, why not? And got a call the next day that was like, hey, we hear you want to run an ERG. Pick one. Wait, what? So I was like, well, I said I wanted to, so let's do this. And I decided, since I had come out recently, I was going to run our LGBT employee resource group. And I did that for a little over 3 years. And we were literally, so Hitachi Vantara is part of Hitachi Limited. They have over 900 subsidiaries. They are a Japanese company. At the time when we started the ERG, we were one of only 2 in all 900 subsidiaries that had an LGBT plus ERG. At the time of my departure from Hitachi, we were hitting, I think, around 20. And our ERG was the driving factor in moving forward with building those ERGs in those other subsidiaries. We also partnered with Hitachi Limited for the first time ever in over 100 years, see them rainbowify their logo and their platform for Pride Month, which, if you know anything about Japanese companies, that's huge. I worked to help establish all of the other ERGs that we had in the space, disabilities, mental health first aid, our Black employee resource group, and our Hispanic employee resource group. So it was a really exciting time, and I was really grateful for the opportunity to be able to, create that safe space for those individuals and to be able to have those conversations and, drive forward some really positive changes.
Right. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for sharing that. Who wants to go next? Chantel?
Yeah, I'll go. Yes. I actually learned about ERGs from a job. I got by trade, I was a marketer for 20 plus years, and just landed in D&I after a reworking of the strategy in my mind about what I wanted to do in the rest of my life. And so I applied to a role that was a marketing program manager. And it happened to be the marketing program manager for a D&I team that was dedicated to building out the ERGs. And it was a short-term position that they wanted to build out a program for awarding their ERG members. And I jumped into the role and did that. It was a contract position, but that was the thing that made me understand and know what ERGs were, and how, starting at the top almost, at a company that really were dedicated to their ERGs and supporting them, investing in them, leveraging them, etc. I started it in that way, but then therefrom moved into other companies that were really in the infancy of their ERG experience. And so I had the opportunity to be a part of an ERG, the Black ERG, at 2 other companies, and then became a D&I practitioner and was the ERG advisor at a company. And I landed into the role in such a wonderful way. I was actually leading an initiative for our for the Black ERG, in which we raised $100,000 for HBCUs. That's historically Black colleges and universities. And we were celebrating it. And I didn't know at the time, but on the phone was the chief diversity officer. And her assistant called me afterwards, and therefrom, within 2 weeks, offered me a job. So that is, ERGs really are an activator, like you said. Like, it literally, hearing me and hearing about the work that we did inside of our ERGs literally landed me a job.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Ed?
Sure. Going back to even my why, that's important in terms of how ERGs come together and help local communities. I was really excited to play football at the high school that I went to, Bellarmine College Prep in Silicon Valley, and I was offered a full scholarship, but I needed to have my knee operated on. And from that experience, 2 weeks after I got home from the operation, I couldn't breathe. And so they rushed me to the hospital, and for about 36 hours, I was there, and they didn't know what it was, and they were treating me as if it was pneumonia. And what it turned out was that I had blood clots from the knee go through my heart, and they stuck in the lung walls. And so there was a period of time where I didn't even know if I was going to live, get out of that bed, and if I was, what would I do with my life? So I set 3 goals for myself. One was that I really didn't travel very much, so I wanted to do international business travel, if that was possible in the future. I wanted to be whatever organization I was at the age of 30. I wanted to be an executive there, and then I wanted to pay it forward. I was able to get out of that bed and still be able to help other people. That to me has always been my why. So take that fast forward. I went through the packaging industry, executive positions there. I was recruited into the publishing, international publishing business about the non-wovens technology. So I had three hats on. I was the editor, publisher, and conference director for 5 consecutive days on three aspects of this industry. But then that international travel, when my son was born, I decided I needed to change that. So that's where I got involved with working for a small tech company called Pacific Bell, which became SBC, which became AT&T, and got involved. The driver for me was initially education, helping young people learn that because I was the first in my family to go to college, what can we do to help them think about their future down that path? So starting out with the ERG at the time in San Ramon, California, we created something called High Tech Day. And what that was workshops, STEM workshops for local high school students. And then I would speak to them about their vision. Where do you see yourself going after this degree? It's not just putting a certificate on the wall. What do you want to do with it? What do you want to accomplish? So that's been my driver, along with the ERG philosophy and the structure. So within the AT&T ERG, I wasn't just in the Asemos group. I partnered with 5 different organizations. The largest one were the women of AT&T, just like the number I'm outnumbered on this panel. So collaborating with groups of people that you see the same, they're attracted to an area or an idea, and they want to help. Being a lifelong musician, that's always, in my mind, a music is a superpower to bring people of all cultures, all ages together in the moment to dance, to celebrate. And when you're there connected with people, then you can have these other conversations to work through things. So that's been my driver, my why. It's been around education. It's been around partnering with other groups to have a greater social impact.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking it that route to also sharing why, because I know that's also a question that could probably get us get us down through the hour if we started with that. But I wanted to share how did I get? I love how Terry said through a survey that a survey got you. I think for me, a lunch got me because I remember seeing a flyer. My very first experience or even awareness that ERGs existed was the flyer I saw in the break room about a lunch program. I was like, oh, there's gonna be food.
Right?
And I ended up, getting food, but it was also a great session. It was a lunch and learn put together by our women ERG. And I really enjoyed the conversation. The speaker was amazing. And I remember stopping at the table, at the check-in table at the end, like, what is this? Like, who is putting, is this a department? Is this and just really getting to understand ERGs and like, oh, I want to be a part of this, like support this. So that was my first exposure. And I think that kind of leads us to even the meat of the conversation we're going to have today, around what companies can do for you to get the best from your employee resource group. It's not enough just to start them. And this week I've been having that conversation. How can you support them and for you to get the best for your employees and also for the business? There's a lot of work that needs to be done to support them consistently, just like any other department. I want to start with a caveat because we have everybody on this call is a consultant, as worked with ERGs, and so I work with organizations that want to launch ERGs, and one of the fear or that leaders have around ERGs is like, why are we doing so much? We invest in this person and they get poached. They get all this exposure and they leave the company. Well, I always say employees are going to leave anyway. People move around. Nobody, it's not my company. I'm not going to be here for the rest of my life. I mean, you can't guarantee that I will be. Most people move around. But what message are your employees taking? Right? There are companies that I haven't worked in years that people still reach out to me to ask me when they want to take a job. They ask me about the organization. They ask me about the culture. So if you invest in your employees, you can't worry about people leaving because people's careers are evolving and it could go different ways. But the focus of our conversation, as consultants who are working in this space now, is to give insights to leaders within the companies who are starting ERGs or have ERGs. How can you better leverage your ERGs to solve the retention, employee engagement issues and questions that we have? So our insights are directed inwards for you as leaders, but you can't let the fear of they're going to leave be the one thing that holds you back. So if we all could talk about now, what are some of the things that worked well in your ERG experience, either personally or with your clients? What are the things that worked well? What did companies do well to support their leaders? What are some of the things that maybe didn't work well that you've seen?
Mhm.
Ed, should we start with you this time?
Sure. So high level, I just recently also spoke to the executive sponsors and the leadership of Arvis Bank's first diversity summit. And so they were looking to me as like, if they wanted to create, they're called associate impact groups, a legacy for that group going forward, what would be the key ideas or the components? And for me, everything starts with credibility that can build trust. And if you give respect, you get respect back. And so there's a difference between a company that hears the word DEI 5 years ago, oh, we've got a DEI department. And then it turns into a PR group, right? Because it's the words and the sentences, but they don't have the programs, they don't have the process to build people up. So in that credibility, trust, and respect context, you need to provide learning opportunities for people. As I mentioned in our pre-discussion, is that at AT&T we're 501c3s, and each role, whether you're the president, vice president of operations, communications, professional development, after that 2-year role ends, you can do another role for 2 years. So there's that process. There's also the making sure that everybody has the same vision statement, that you have measurable goals. That's a real key that for organizations is to be able to benchmark progress. And it's not a PR program. It's a way for them really to build their ERGs into leaders, particularly in the Hispanic community. There are 64 million plus Hispanics in the US, not just from Mexico, but all Hispanics. And if you looked at that from the gross domestic product, including consumption, that would be the 5th largest group in the world, Hispanics in the US compared to other countries outside of there. So if I'm the marketing manager for Nike, and typically Hispanic families have younger parents and more children. So that's a growth segment. That's the kind of thing where you need to collaborate and support organizations where there is a bottom line business in alignment. The business goals are in alignment with the ERG. And then certainly internal and external collaborations. That to me those are key steps to building a legacy for an organization.
Yeah, great insights. Thank you so much, Ed. Chantel?
I think as we think about the employee life cycle, there are a lot of thought of like schools of thought now that instead of thinking about the last stage as being offboarding, it's more thinking about the last stage as being transitioning, because that means that that employee may transition out of what you know them to be, and the role that they hold for you right now. But that doesn't mean that you cannot leverage them. I'm a part of, inside of LinkedIn, I'm a part of 2 different alumni groups. And those alumni groups, meaning like we are alumni now from the company we used to work at. So that in that group now we are still advocates of the company, and we can be advocates as customers, we can be advocates as even partners when we grow our own business. So there are lots of different ways that I think if companies look at employees as resources, there are a lot of ways we can show up as resources even when we are transitioned out of the role that we're in. And so I really think my call to action for leaders is to really think about the people that you're attracting to your company as being people who maintain some semblance of advocacy for your company, and that advocacy can show up in a lot of different ways. So that's for the kind of leaders who are thinking about, oh no, I can't invest in ERGs. But for the other part of your question, I love to begin with the end in mind. And the end is there are companies, all companies want to be profitable. There are lots of them that are sitting on, exchanges. They are publicly traded companies. As publicly traded companies, you have to represent to some degree what your social, I think it's called ESG, environment, social, and governance. So it's an ESG report. A lot of them have to submit that. And so given that they have to submit it, or they have to, if they operate in the United States, they have to identify their diversity goals. There are a lot of companies that are not even because they have to, but they submit diversity reports. And if you go on Glassdoor or any active platform that highlights companies, you can almost always find like really great insight into how that company honors diversity. Well, ERGs are a real cornerstone of representing that. And so I think when companies are not activating that real core cornerstone of representing their employees inside and outside of their companies, they're missing an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I've never heard about the alumni group for companies, and I'm like, okay, that sounds like something I definitely should look into as well. One thing that I wanted to highlight, if you're listening to these, is from Ed's feedback, right? We talk about 501c3 as nonprofit. That's also something new to me, hearing about. But I think, don't be put off by that. I think the key message there is in the kind of structure that it takes for you to set up these ERGs as 501c3 within your organization. And so that's like the pinnacle, the peak of it. You can start by providing a lot more structure and build the credibility, as Ed shared. And I also love Chantal's point around alumni. Your employees are your most prized resource as an organization. I mean, we are in a fast moving, evolving workplace, and you're focused outward so much on the latest products and what you should do and target marketing. You have employees that represent a rich pool of
Yes.
your customers, right? You have a group right there. So I really think think about your employees. Even when they leave, they are still representing your brand in some way. What message are they sharing? So thank you for that. Terry, what are your thoughts?
So I love everything that both Ed and Chantel have said so far. And I really do think that understanding where your employees are coming from, even as they're leaving, it's so valuable and it's so important. I kind of look at it this way. I've always been about, when you take care of your employees, they take care of your business. And at the end of the day, it's a relationship. And eventually relationships go different directions, right? You've dated somebody for 5 years, you grow in different directions, and suddenly you're like, you know what? This isn't working for us anymore. And I'm going to go do this now. And that's okay. But when you learn to respect and keep that relationship in the new form that it's at, is really where you can find value. I was actually doing some reading last night on how the importance of when your employees leave and getting that feedback, getting those exit surveys, getting those exit interviews. And it gives you the opportunity to determine where there might be gaps in your own DEI progression and your goals. Do you have equity gaps that you didn't even think you may have had? And that's where I think those exit interviews and maintaining those relationships is really exceptionally valuable in order to really get that visibility. Not to mention the fact that by working those relationships after the departure, I think it also helps educate your leaders to understand maybe where they've got their own gaps in their knowledge, where they can learn and they can grow and further themselves. So I think there's a lot to be said for employees that leave and maintaining those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, I've worked for a few Fortune 500 companies. I've never had an exit interview. And even the last time, the last one I left before I became a full-time entrepreneur, I remember waiting for an exit interview because I actually wanted to give feedback. Nobody approached me.
Mm.
And the only person that approached me from that company was my executive sponsor. My ERG executive sponsor reached out on my last day and said, I know it's your last day and you don't have any obligation. I would love to have a conversation with you after you leave. And I still remember it because I felt so touched and seen that, my manager's manager, I didn't get exit interview. Nobody from HR reached out for an interview to ask me, but my executive sponsor from my ERG experience reached out and we had a virtual call a couple of weeks after I left the company. And it really wasn't about feedback at that point, but I did give very real feedback with him in a way that I probably wouldn't have been able to give my manager. So um, I feel like, yes, exit interview, what words they take away, things that are not working. I felt like we're already going into what's not working, but not all roses and everything for ERGs. So I wanted to give an opening for anybody who wants to share about that. What have you seen that companies are doing around ERGs that maybe you caution against, or what are some of the maybe negative, not so good part of running ERGs? Does anybody have any client or personal experience around that?
I have one to offer. I think being a D&I practitioner, the immediate thing that I saw with one of the companies that I worked with is the inequitability of funding ERGs. So often ERGs are funded by their executive sponsors. Depending upon where your executive sponsor sits in the business, you could have a lot of money or a little bit of money to do the programming for your ERG. And I've recently become acquainted with a company who does funding from the top. And there is so much. I just I just was smiling just too much, probably, because I'm like, that is the best thing ever. Because if you're going to fund them, funding them equally allows them to have some equity in how they, well, from the big pot. But then now they actually, because you're doing that, they owe you now the things that they have done to advance the goal and the mission and align it with the company. And so when companies allow it to have this disaggregated funding through individual executive sponsors, what they're losing is the ability to actually weigh in on driving some of the outputs of that. And I think it's a definite loss because these people are volunteers. So when they finish working at 5 o'clock, they are getting on other calls, or they're waking up early and doing this work. And this work is contributing to the visibility of your company. And when you are not investing in it in a unified fashion, you lose the ability to actually contribute to how it drives.
Yeah.
So I think that I see that, and I've seen in several different companies, I've seen that is a single thing that is kind of the thing that can be the make or break.
Yeah, absolutely. And you lose the right to expect results from them too. If you are not investing in people's time and you are putting all of the responsibility on them to fix your company's DEI, They have, obviously, from what you have shown, they have other priorities. It's not the ERG. So when the workload shifts and get busy, the first thing that goes is, guess what? Everybody drops the ball on ERG because it's like, okay, I gotta do the one that pays the bills. The company doesn't really care about this stuff anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can jump in, one of the things that I've seen, and I think this is somewhat of a cultural mindset, and it can vary from company to company, is when you have companies who do not see ERG work as work. And so it's frowned upon to be involved in an ERG or working on efforts for an ERG because that's not part of your day job. This is your day job. And getting managers and leaders and really shifting that cultural mindset from the idea that ERG work is not work. Oh, it's very much work. Absolutely. It's taking care of your employees. And that's really the biggest, most important thing that you need to be doing is taking care of your employees. So why wouldn't you see that as just as important and valid work as, doing their day job?
Right. Right.
If I can add to that, high level at AT&T, and it could be any company, but particularly here in Silicon Valley, you've got organizations that really were expanding very, very fast, a lot of additional hires, and now they've been cutting back on the headcount. When organizations, and AT&T is an example, they went into debt $130 billion when they bought Time Warner and DirecTV. So that has been driving. When I was there were 11,000 employees that were part of the Acemos ERG. And because of headcount reductions, they're down to about 7,000. So to me, the core issue within ERGs, to me, it's like my own family. It's an extended family. And if you can relate to each other at that level, you want to help the other group. So whether it's a lower budget, you still want to have an impact and you want to volunteer for these groups. So that was for me. I even got recognized as ERG member of the month when I was there because I was involved with so many ERGs. So to me, it's about the why, what you can accomplish together, more so than the corporate structure is going to, they're going to make cutbacks. Some of them are going to be, because of the budget, some of them because they don't understand DEI. So I really encourage groups to make sure that they understand what those business goals are. BRGs, kind of evolve from ERGs, but again, stay focused. We had it as an example, because of absenteeism, AT&T created this program. There was Your Health Matters. But what I did is that it wasn't just the employee and Hispanic families. It could be because the abuelita, the grandmother, is sick. So they're going to stay home because of that issue. That was before remote work took off after COVID. But the point I'm making here is that we expanded the Your Health Matters program. We called it Me Salud, and we partnered with the women of AT&T. We had a professional come in from Kaiser Permanente, their health maintenance organization. They're headquartered here in the Bay Area. And quarterly, we would have a presentation on the topics of our choice. And then I recorded that and shared that with all the national members within the Women of AT&T and the Hispanic Acemos organization, because it was certainly more than just the people there locally in San Ramon. And we were able to keep that recording up for a month. And we uploaded in English and Spanish all the handouts that person gave to the people in San Ramon so that they could share that with their families at home. So that if they have somebody with cancer or some other, disease that they're dealing with, and that was one of the reasons why they weren't going to work, here's a way that providing that educational resource, things that they can do with their own diet, that could help them as a family as well. So to me, there's this financial kind of thing that is going to be a limitation at some point. But how do you make that into lemonade? How do you take that and bring resources together to still make those accomplishments and be in alignment with the business goals of the company?
Yeah, and I love what you shared as you were breaking down the work though that still went into that. I think it kind of aligns with what we're saying is, companies seeing ERG as not work. If you don't start from at least a minimum budget, it doesn't give ERG leaders anything to work with. But when they have a number and at least they have a starting point, there's more incentive to put a little more hours and human labor into making that little amount stretch. Because what you just described is, the company, the company could have paid to have the sessions over and over again and distributed, but it was more effective it was effective to repackage and repurpose and translate it. But all of that took work, right? Somebody is doing that work to make sure that
And
that material
as another
goes.
metric to that point, Lola, so we started High Tech Day in San Ramon, California. And over the years, we would, when I was there last, we had 2,626 students across the country in 39 locations in the U.S., Puerto Rico, and Mexico City, giving them STEM workshops. And I would talk to the local people there about their career college goals and give them time to do that. We also gave them applications for scholarships. And over the years, as of last year, the Asemos ERG, raising their own funds, have given out $4.5 million in scholarships to students that were at those High Tech Day events. Now, those students, because they have an AT&T scholarship, where do you think the first company would be that they would want to work for because of AT&T contributing, Asemos contributing to their education? A lot of them went to work for AT&T. So again, that's a metric. If you are giving out scholarships, how many of those scholarship recipients would be great employees in your organization?
In your organization, yeah.
Pipeline.
Chantel, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I said it's like a pipeline strategy, right? So yeah, because it by default, the ERGs represents identities and interests. And because of that, we are normally first out in the community and are a really good medium for doing that. And so that allows us to basically connect with HR and develop pipelining programs. So like what you just described, Ed, that's exactly what it is. And then that is the key performance indicator, right? To some degree.
Right. Yeah. And, just kind of tying all of these back, we are running out of time. And so we need to wrap up. We could talk about ERGs and their impacts all day long. But I just wanted to also highlight that when we talk about ERGs and the ERG leaders, all of these accomplishments, all of these things, again, I shared how I found out about ERG on the flyer. We are passionate about doing this thing. It doesn't mean that we are trained. Right? We want to do the work. We are available. And I think a lot of time the miss that organizations have is that support for that person to grow into that role. So whether you provide that support or not, the same person that was raising up their hand to lead your ERG that maybe wasn't ready skill wise is going to develop the skills, right?
Exactly.
So the resume is changing. If my day job says one thing, one title, when I got hired into your company, if you're looking at all of that data and you're focused on my title, you're missing the fact that leading ERGs, I'm gaining so much skill. I'm developing so well. How is your internal recruiting effort catching up with that, right? You talk about these people are passionate, they're excited. Once people get plugged into ERGs, they're always going to be plugged in, whether at your company or another company. Immediately you get another job, you're taking all of that passion to your next organization. So the company is missing out, right? So I love speaking at HR conferences around these. Like there's eating talent that you're leaving on the table. So if you all could just share one last thing around that, around how companies can retain their ERG leaders and members career-wise, what are the tips, what are the strategies for a recruiter, for an HR manager, for a CEO that wants to really retain their most passionate employees? What should they be doing?
I definitely think they should be investing in them. So I recently became aware of an ERG's you can get an ERG leadership certificate. But that costs. and companies that maybe want to invest, and that could be an attrition not an attrition, like a keeping strategy. Attrition is the opposite. I can't remember. No, attrition. Yes, yes. So yes, a keeping strategy. Yes, I can't think of the word, but yes, like if you know that you have people out there that are volunteering, before and after work, to maintain these ERGs, I think a really great way to affirm them is to actually invest in them and their professional development. And if an ERG is an area that they're leaning into, then definitely covering the cost of an ERG leadership certificate, and that is available through an organization that's putting on an event that I'm helping this year, and it's the ERGleadershipconference.com. And you can, if you are a leader and you're listening to this, I think that that's a very solid way to affirm the work that the people who are volunteering are dedicating to your company. Just invest in their own career.
Training. Yes, investing in training them, leadership, learning and development. I've seen companies that also even create their internal learning and development strategy around ERG leaders, right? To say, what do they need? What are they asking for? And so how can we develop models that support them? So that's great. Thank you for sharing that resource, Chantel.
I can add to that a little before we leave.
Yes.
There's a company here in the Bay Area called Salesforce, and they have DE&I goals that are part of the leadership's responsibilities. So that's immeasurable. If they bring more people in on DEI, format, they get increases in their pay. And that was one of the feedback. I did a survey with those executives at Arvis Bank, the sponsors and the leadership. And that was one of the key elements that they would like to see going forward, is that people that are exceptional ERG leaders, they had AIGs, then could that be factored into their compensation as well? They saw that as an incentive. And as an example, at AT&T, we also reached out, and this is available for any organization. There's the Presidential Service Awards.gov. So we were able to use the hours. We tracked the hours for everybody in every ERG. You would put in, I just did this project, it was this number of hours, we did these things. That data, we were able to say, okay, for that last year, you had 2,000 hours, 3,000 hours, 5,000 hours of ERG volunteer activity. And if you're at a certain level, you get the President of the United States Service Award for that. So that was built into the AT&T structure, and that was on a person's performance review, that here's the additional work that I've done. And that was, again, within HR. They looked at that as a way, if they're going to have 3 equal candidates all the same, that was going to help elevate them to maybe get that position.
I love it. Yeah. Right. Thank you for that solid example, because again, that's what we're talking about here. That it's not just about talking about we have ERGs, our ERGs are doing well. What is the data? What is the system that you have put in place? Track and reward them. Reward could look like a certification. Reward could look like, making their hours count towards an award, right? These are things that you can measure. Doesn't necessarily have to be, we assigned a budget of 50,000 to our ERGs, we're good. It could be about how have you invested in the ERG leaders themselves, something that they can show for it, that they can walk away with. Thank you, Ed.
Data is always something that people can refer to, and it's equal for everybody. So, all the ERGs that you have all have the opportunity to track their hours, and you can see where those people that are putting in more hours, what they're doing with that work as well.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm always looking for advocates and change makers.
Thank you, Ed. Terry, is there anything you want to add to wrap this up?
I love everything that both Chantel and Ed have said, and I think the one thing I would add is give them the space to be able to attend conferences. Give them the space and the time to explore things. For example, when I was running my ERG, I had the opportunity to attend Out and Equal for the first time, which, if you're not familiar with it, is the largest LGBT employee resource group conference, I think, in the US, if not the world. It's huge. And let me tell you, being in a room with 3,000 other queer people is an experience. I learned so much in those 3 days that I came back, I completely revamped all of my goals, all of my accomplishments, everything that I wanted to do for our ERG. And it completely changed my mindset about how I wanted to approach this. It was an absolute game changer. And those are the kinds of opportunities you want to give to your ERG leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. Outside of your company, it's not just about the work they are doing, is sponsoring and supporting them uh, to be in spaces where they can get empowered, right?
Exactly.
It's going to bring value to your organization, and it's going to give an experience that they can hone, right? That they can carry with them. So thank you all for sharing. I think this was great. I think this was a lot. If you're new to the ERG conversation, follow each of these amazing leaders on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is our primary base. I know people might be watching it on different spaces, but you can follow Terry, Chantel, Ed, and myself. And on the details, you have my email. If you have any follow-up question, there's a lot of resources and support and insight around ERGs. And you can also find us, a few of us, all of us, most first Fridays at 10 a.m. I host an all things ERG call, and it's 10 a.m. every first Friday of the month. We are on. We are getting coached. We are getting resources. We are networking about all things ERG from across different company and with professionals, DEI leaders, and ERG managers. So you can have a follow-up conversation on that call, but I bet you will see all of us on that call every month. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you for your insights. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for the thing you're giving back to investing in ERGs, right? For others as well, in your work, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lola.
Thank you, Lola.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Terry.
Bye.
Chantel.
Bye, Ed.
Okay.
Bye.